These are the S250 binoculars sent to me by Fraser Optics. They are huge. They weigh 3.7 pounds and they cost nearly $4,000. That's the bad news. The good news is they're American-made, 14-power, gyro-stabilized binoculars with some of the best glass of any optic of any kind I've ever had the chance to use. In fact, when I let people try these out, their reactions are almost exactly the same. First, they talk about how clear the glass is, then they talk about how cool the image stabilization is. That shouldn't really be a surprise because Fraser Optics has been supplying US and foreign militaries with their binoculars for over 40 years. In fact, if you've ever used the M25 binoculars, you've used Fraser Optics. But up until recently, the only way for private individuals to get their hands on them was to buy them surplus or refurbished at a price of around $6,000. And that's if you could even find them because they'd get snatched up pretty quickly at that price. Who in the heck is spending that much money on a set of refurbished binoculars? Primarily boaters, especially those hunting for game fish, who are having to scan large spans of ocean for signs of game fish like birds and bait balls on a rocking boat where using a tripod is just gonna make things worse. Western hunters also find Fraser Optics helpful for their clarity and stability in finding mule deer and finding elk and finding rams on plains and mountainsides. Well, now you can get a brand new pair of Fraser Optics in the S250 for much less than what you would have to pay for a used set of M25 binoculars. Plus, they come with an unconditional lifetime guarantee. If you break them, Fraser Optics will repair them, even if it's your fault. But they're also some of the toughest binoculars you're ever gonna use. And that's why the S250 binoculars are what's coming up next on Twang and Bang. Starting over 40 years ago, Fraser Optics was the first U.S. manufacturer of military-grade gyro-stabilized optics. Used extensively by military and law enforcement units around the world, Fraser Optics now offers the same tech to the consumer market with their new S250 binoculars. In other words, these binocs look like military gear because they are military gear. Starting with crystal clear 14-power magnification, Fraser adds the gyro-stabilization system they've been refining and supplying to government contracts to demand not only performance, but also durability. The glass-filled polycarbonate body is nitrogen purged, 100% waterproof, and dustproof. Power for the gyro is provided by a single CR123A lithium, which is good for 12 hours of continuous operation. A built-in regulator allows external power off 6 to 28 volt DC power supplies. Fraser Optics aren't just made in the USA, each unit is assembled, tuned, and tested by hand. Each lens is cleaned and assembled into its housing before being inspected again to ensure everything is clear and straight after fitting together. The people performing the assembly do so with the knowledge that what they build could be used by our military to defend our country or law enforcement to keep us safe at home. Nothing is rushed, as you will see with the process by which the gimbal is balanced by hand. This footage was taken by my good friend John Patton of the Gun Collective, and you'll hear him ask a few questions.
Like, I see little tweaks that can be done here. So first thing I do is I check this way. So I check for smoothness and motion, and if something's wrong it'll bind or get stuck. But it kind of just flows.
And that adjustment you're making in the front there, what is that for?
This is weight, so I'm shifting weight from here over here.
And you want it to be in as much of a neutral position as possible, correct?
Correct. So I'm just nudging it with my finger, watching the motion and kind of getting it to settle back in the center.
Okay.
And I'll adjust different weights around. That's just one. That's this way. Then I'm going to pivot this way. And I'm going to check the motion here. And also, the balance. Let's flip it this way.
This step helps the S250 achieve a battery life of 12 hours of constant use, because if the gimbal naturally settles itself, the gyroscope has less work to do. Each pair is individually pressure tested to ensure all of the seals are both watertight and dustproof. Even the slightest gap in any of the seals would produce bubbles over the course of this test, and where the bubbles develop, let them know what needs to be reworked. The final step in assembly is nitrogen purging, which removes any source of moisture that could fog inside of the lenses where it would be impossible to wipe off. Every single pair is then tested for collimation and focus using lasers, as well as impact tested in multiple axes. In short, before you get your hands on a pair of S250 binoculars, an experienced team has ensured that it will perform as promised, backed by an unconditional lifetime guarantee.
Oh, took a little bit of a bang there. Let's see. They power on. Stabilized view. Took a licking, keeps on ticking.
The end result is a pair of binoculars much tougher than you might think for something that houses image stabilization. They're also buoyant, so if you drop them off your boat or dock, you won't lose them to the abyss. This footage especially shows how great the high-vis silicone cover is for maritime use, where camouflaging your location isn't as important as it is for hunters, law enforcement, and military users.
So they're still on, still powered up? How are they doing?
Okay. There it goes.
Still stable.
So it was working and it finally set in and we're good now.
I feel really lucky to be able to show this to you. This is, of course, the inside of a set of S250 binoculars, showing the secret, showing the voodoo behind Fraser Optics' excellent gyroscopic image stabilization. They loaned me this demo pair. They did tell me that this isn't balanced the way a production unit would be balanced, and there are a few parts that are missing that they might consider proprietary, but everything is here that you need to see how this works. Plus, once the gyroscope is active, it works exactly the same as a production pair. First thing I want to do is orient you to the binoculars. These are the objective lenses. The image would be out here, and the light would travel this direction through these sets of prism lenses and into the ocular lenses, and then into your eyeballs. Your eyeballs would be back here. I'm going to zoom in so you can better see the mechanics. And that's the key word, mechanical, because the image stabilization provided by this system is purely mechanical. There are no electronics associated with the image stabilization at all. There is something called active image stabilization. It involves a small gyroscope on a chip, a microprocessor that uses the information from that small gyroscope to make decisions on how to fire servos that move a gimbal around and adjust lenses for image stabilization. But that kind of system is very sensitive to impact and environmental conditions. This is not. Even though everything looks complicated, most of what you see is because everything needs to be adjusted and tuned one time, then everything is locked down and nothing's going to budge from that point on. The first mechanical thing is the iris lock. It's just a lever on the back of the binoculars that opens a series of sliding plates that kind of open a hole where there's a post on the back of this counterbalance that's in line with the gyroscope. That is what unlocks the gimbal and allows the prism lenses to freely move. Here's where the voodoo is. It's in these assemblies of prism lenses here and here. There's more than one prism lens in each assembly here and here. No matter where they are pointing, on the front here, the light coming out the back goes straight into your eyeball. That's crazy to me. I don't know how they do that. They're not going to explain it to me, but that's what happens. But you need to have some way of keeping the prism lenses pointed at the right direction. That's where the gyroscope comes in. I'm going to lock this back down and I'm going to power this up. The second thing mechanical that you need to know is the power button. It's not a digital power button. It actually clicks on. And after about 10 to 15 seconds, the gyroscope gets enough revolutions going to where it starts to work. It'll continue spinning up in RPMs for about a minute. With it open like this, you can hear a little bit of a whine, but with it closed up, it's not nearly as loud. And remember, these are binoculars that you're not using when your target is 15 yards from you. It's when they're 1,500 yards from you. So the little bit of noise that this system makes just isn't an issue in their typical use at all. But this is mechanical. There are no servos moving this gimbal. It's just that spinning weight, just like a gyroscope toy, that's keeping the prisms pointed in their original orientation. Of course, once I stop moving, the gimbal returns to neutral. And that's the second part of this system, which I think is especially cool. On the end of the gyroscope assembly is a copper plate. And in front of that, mounted to the frame of the binoculars, is a permanent magnet. This copper plate that's rotating simply because it's attached to the gyroscope, which is already rotating to provide stability, generates a magnetic field that interacts with this permanent magnet. This permanent magnet wants to sit in the middle of the field generated by this disc. And that's what provides the return to neutral. You can see how without the rotation, there's no magnetic field to interact with the permanent magnet, and so there's no return to neutral. There's no buffering of the movement either. But I think that's really smart. They leveraged something that was already happening, the spinning of the gyroscope, to provide the stabilization in a way that allows them to, at the same time, provide a very smooth dampening effect as well as a return to center. I'm going to get this fired back up again. First, I'm going to close the iris lock, get that fired up, and now I'm going to unlock it. There's a little bit of movement that I don't think happens with a production pair. I just think that's because this wasn't tuned as much from the factory. But now I'm going to bump this by hand like I did before, and look how it returns to center. I'm going to move it over here like before, and it returns to center. And the only thing that has changed is that copper disc is now rotating. And that creates that magnetic field that wants to center itself around this permanent magnet. I think that's brilliant in its simplicity. It's not requiring any additional moving parts. It's just putting copper on the end of something that's already moving. It's just mounting a permanent magnet on something that's already staying still. That is brilliant. And it works extremely well. These don't have a center focus knob like conventional binoculars. Each eyepiece has its own diopter, which means that you need to focus twice to get a clear image. The best way to do it, I think, is to close one eye and then focus on the side for your open eye. And then once you get that focus, it's just faster to look at what the diopter is set to because it has marks on it, and then match the other eyepiece. You should at least get close. My eyes are corrected. I've got contacts in, so they're perfectly matched. But even if your eyes aren't perfectly matched, that's going to at least get it close quickly, so then you can do any kind of fine tuning from there. But it's not as quick as using a single focus knob for both eyepieces, but it's not that slow either. I think it's helpful to think of binoculars as Google for your eyes. You're using them to search for information. Image stabilization means you're going to get your results faster and they're going to be more accurate. They're faster because you don't have to wait to bust out a tripod like my camera's sitting on to start your scan. And they're going to be more accurate results because of the clarity in the S250 glass as well as the stable image. You're going to be able to better judge a curl or a set of antlers. You're going to be able to better tell the difference between sea foam and a bait ball. When you're burning gas on a boat, doing big game fishing, or you've taken vacation time off and you spend a lot of money traveling to do your hunt of a lifetime, time is money. And something like the S250 means you can spend more of that time hunting and less of that time trying to figure out where to hunt and what to hunt. As I've mentioned with every optic video I've ever done, there's no good way to record through something like these binoculars while capturing the clarity of the image you see with your naked eye. However, this is still the best way to show how well the gyro stabilization allows you to pay attention to important details on your target. In this case, I'm watching a car drive down a road about 500 yards from me. Without the stabilization on, there was no way for me to pick out the occupants of the vehicle. But with the gyro fired up, I can actually make out that there's only a driver, and with my naked eye, I can actually make out his face even though it doesn't show up on video. Here's what it's like scanning a wood line without stabilization. You might see the critters you're looking for, but if they're standing in a shadow or tucked back in the brush, forget it. With the gyro doing its thing, your ability to find an animal peeking out from the trees is greatly enhanced, which means that not only are you less likely to miss one, but you can scan the tree line more quickly because it's easier to eliminate places without visible game. Despite my struggles to get good footage through these binoculars, I actually hit a home run with this footage of a full moon. Again, you can see how much difference the gyro stabilization does with letting your eyes pick out the details on the moon's surface. That said, using your eyes to look through these binoculars, you can actually see the depth and the texture of the moon, something this video doesn't accurately convey. Suffice it to say that you'll be just as happy with the clarity of the S250 glass as you will be with the performance of its stabilization system. These aren't meant for a hunter slipping through the woods trying to find an animal bedded in the brush. Any 8-power binocular is going to be better than these for that because they're going to be a lot lighter and you'll be able to roll the focus to better pick out antlers and ears and tails through the sticks. These are clearly meant for situations that aren't handled very well by conventional binoculars. Scanning large spans of water and land, especially at farther distances, especially in situations where it's not practical to stabilize the binoculars by hand. If you're an eastern woodland deer hunter, the S250 probably aren't going to do you a whole lot of good. But if you're offshore fishing, the S250 binoculars can pay for themselves in fuel savings by helping you to find birds and game fish that'll take you a whole lot longer to find using conventional binoculars on a rocking boat. If you're a western hunter of elk or rams on a mountainside or deer or antelope in the plains, you can faster find your trophies and better estimate a curl or a set of antlers before busting out your spotting scope to confirm. You can better scan for game when you're bouncing around in a truck or on a UTV or on horseback. Are these worth $4,000? They definitely are to people who are already spending a ton of money hunting game fish, hunting animals, anything where the hunting is primarily done through binoculars. If you want to learn more about the S250 from Fraser Optics, be sure to click the link in the video description. Be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. You can see the links right here. And be sure to sign up for my mailing list. It's the only way to stay in touch no matter what happens to my content here on YouTube. I really appreciate you watching Twang and Bang, and I hope to see you next time.